Welcome back. We have a really nice episode here planned. I thought it'd be fun to do a playoff matchup for all four games. The big games we got Washington, Arizona in the NL for the one wild card. The other wild card, we have Colorado and St. Louis, which is a cool matchup. In the AL, we have the very evenly matched Toronto Blue Jays against the Los Angeles Angels. And then you got the first place White Sox with 104 wins playing against KC. That's going to be a tough matchup for KC. White Sox are a really good team to be in the wild card. It's tough to match up with that wild card with the division winner there. So those four matchups are going to be really interesting. We're going to go over the advanced stats here and see what kind of matchups we have. We'll start with the NL. Washington has a first place offense. They were the best power hitting team pretty much in the NL next to Boston, best in baseball. They got a really good home run heavy squad. They also have really good base running. They're first place in base running, plus 36 on the base pass. They were really solid stealing bases too with 92. That's after losing Robles and Trey Turner, their old crazy base stealers. So there's always been really good on the base pass. Always had a lot of athleticism there. And so that's obviously, you don't have to talk a lot about that offense, just pretty much first and second across the board. Really, really good. And then middle of the pack pitching, the bullpen really hurt them this season. So they overcame that. Even though the weak bullpen, the offense was just so good and the defense was so good, second place in zone range. Really nice combination there. So kind of made up for being really weak in home runs allowed in the weak bullpen. Pretty weak against contact too. I know that stadium plays contact up a bit, but that's still pretty low rated for a top playoff team. The offense was just so good. They overcame that. They were 35 and 16, it looks like, in the last 2 months of the season. Every season they were really strong. Every month they're really strong, except for a weak May. Battled me all year and then went crazy hot at the end of the year to kind of blow by me there in the last 2 months and take the division crown. So really nice squad in Washington, obviously led by the superstar Juan Soto. If you look at their lineup, they got a really good offense across the board and big time DH with 60 contact, 60 power. You got a big time bat in right field there, and Lewis Brinson. You got the really rangy center fielder and Bradfield, defensive specialist. Riley's got a huge power bat. Real Mutu's the best offensive catcher in baseball. Had a huge offensive season. Juan Soto is looking like front runner for NL MVP. And then you got the nice Xavier Edwards, has a huge skill set with big time base stealing and really solid contact in the middle there too of the infield. And then you got the defensive specialist and Matt Chapman. A really, really, really nice team right across the board. And so they match up with, oh, sorry, I didn't talk about their pitching. And then pitching wise, you got the couple really solid arms. You got the veteran and Woodruff and Giolito, and then Michael Bard, who had a really good season. Him and Giolito were their top arms there. And Kepner had a really nice season too, at over 2 WAR, 4.5 FIP was a little high, but really decent season out of him. A couple big arms in the bullpen with a lot of stuff here. These bottom three guys all 70 and 80 stuff. Will Smith, the big time lefty arm there, and then Minter, their other lefty arm. The rest are all righties. And so that's a really really solid team. It's really tough to hold their offense back. So they're matched up against Arizona. Arizona has a top 5 pitching staff in baseball. They struggle against letting home runs up, so that's the key matchup to look for right there. 11th in home runs versus the number 1 hitting home run team in the league. So it pretty much comes down to Arizona should be able to score some runs, though. Their offense is a top 5 offense, placing against the below average pitching staff from the Washington side of things. And so first and base on balls, that will be tough. Keep them off the first base there with Trout and a couple of those guys with big eyes. They're 4th overall and 3rd in runs scored. So it should be a really high scoring matchup would be what you think from the looking at from the outside statistically. You should have a lot of runs on both sides. So yeah, it'll be really interesting just to see that matchup that I talked about. And if you look at the players side of things from Arizona, they got 3 really solid pitchers, and Marquez, Matt Manning, and Corbin Burns as their big 3 there. Probably go with 4-man rotation. Barriera is really solid lefty out of the bullpen, and they got a couple other guys real nice there. A couple of lefties, which is nice. A couple big arms. Like Kimbrel will be looking for 38-year-old season, looking for a championship. Him and Trout, be really cool to see them win a title if they can make it far in the playoffs this year. A lot of offense from this side of things too. Napier, Gilmore, really solid offensive players in the middle of the infield there. Obviously, Alvarez being healthy is huge. He's wrecked, had a lot of injuries this year, but still managed to play 142 games, playing through a lot of day-to-day injuries, toughed it out, had a really solid season, almost a 400 WOBA on base percentage, so just a beast offensively there. Him and Trout just make such a nasty combo. And then the rookie sensation, Adrian LeDuc, just got called up in like July, just in 50 games at 14 home runs, 300 batting average. Huge season out of him. So good matchup there. Just looking for a couple of key things that we mentioned. See what happens there. Next up, we have Colorado versus St. Louis. Colorado Rockies here are first overall in batting average, first overall in runs scored. They don't have as much power as you would think. I thought it'd be a lot higher than that. They're only 10th. Really good base running team. Don't steal any bases, but they are good on the base pass when they get on there. Second in walks behind Arizona. And they were third in extra base hits. So they make a lot of contact, have a lot of doubles and triples. I know Coors plays that up a bit, but still, you're still first place, still ahead of Washington even. So really solid offense there. Just don't have a ton of power. And then defensively, they're fourth overall in zone range. They were pitching-wise, they're pretty low in a few categories like bat pip, let up a lot of contact. Again, a lot of that's the stadium, but still only 11th in runs allowed. Pretty pretty mediocre ratings. They're pretty middle of the pack, as I'd say. If they're ninth, but that half their games are in Coors, that probably on a more neutral stadium, you probably think they'd be like seventh or sixth or eighth. So kind of middle of the pack to average pitching. And so it really just comes down to just them being able to keep up the base hits in the playoffs. A lot of guys with some solid gap power. You got 70 rated, 60, 60, 55. And then contact side of things, you got the two really plus hitters and the two outfielders in Thomas and Bean. Really plus hitters there. And then Doughty with a big bat at third base there is really solid. And then a lot of 45 guys. No really weak, like 35 or 40 rated bats. All of them are pretty solid, close to 50. Pitching-wise, they got Susac and Selinger and Kyle Wright are the big arms. They got Adrian Hauser and a lot of pretty balanced pitchers, a lot of green ratings, as you can see from all these guys in the bullpen. Pretty high movement. They built their team around movement. They got a ton of movement for Coors there, 75, 75, 65, 65. So they're trying really hard to limit home runs, which 6 overall in home runs playing half your games of Coors is really solid. So they're not going to let up a ton of home runs, and that's really important because on the other side of things, the matchup here you got is St. Louis. St. Louis is really good at home runs. They were second overall behind Washington in total home runs in the NL. They have a really good offense. They don't have as much contact, but they're so home run heavy from a bunch of their guys having like 70 home run power. They score most of their runs through the long ball. They're fifth overall in total runs, even though they're 8th and 9th in batting average and on base percentage. They're not great runners. They stole quite a bit of bases. They had a little mistakes on the base pass. I'm sure a lot of that's the youth they have in their offense. A lot of young players there probably learn how to run the base pass a little bit, but they do have some speed. They will steal a few bags and hit a bunch of home runs. So it's a pretty tough offense to slow down, especially with Coors there. They might hit a bunch of home runs in a few of those away games. And then defensively, they're 6th overall in zone rating, 3rd in efficiency. They have a really heavy strikeout pitching staff that limits the walks pretty well and home runs like crazy. And they're really top notch in everything else. 2nd and 3rd in almost everything. Really good pitching. Probably just rated behind like Pittsburgh there in most categories. Really solid ball club. Pretty much just going to play defense, pitch well, and hit a bunch of home runs. So really comes down to just the home runs. If Colorado can limit that, the high movement versus the high offensive, powerful St. Louis lineup, it's just going to be a really cool matchup. Really interested to see how that goes. So that's the NL side of things. And then on the AL, we'll start with Toronto. Toronto's playing Los Angeles. These teams are really balanced offensively. You got Toronto's middle of the pack and everything. They're really good at base on balls, a ton of walks. Runs scored, they're just a little bit below average. They were 8th in offensive WAR, but only 10th in runs scored. So pretty mediocre to below average offense, not great on the base pass either. But they were really solid on the pitching side of things, what got them as far as they did. They limited the home runs pretty well. Pretty good control, 2nd overall in walks allowed, and the top 4, top 5, and everything else. So pitching-wise, they're definitely really solid, heavy pitching team. If you see, they got a lot of movement in their starting lineup here. 3 guys with 60 and 65 movement. Pretty good control out of their starting staff. So really decent pitching there. They got a really good catcher. Austin Barnes is really solid. And then they got a couple big bats in the lineup there. Jake Bauers played well below his talent level, so he could maybe play a little better in the playoffs. Grisham. Guerrero, a couple big bats there. So really about 2-3 strong bats, a bunch of defensive guys, and solid pitching. They match up pretty well with the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels have a ton of power in their corner outfield spots. Julio Rodriguez and Crum both have 65 power there, a couple big bats. Meyer at shortstop there, big bat out of the middle infield. Marte also in the middle infield with 50 power at 18 home runs. So you got a lot of juice from the shortstop and second base positions and the outfield position, which is cool. Makes up their lack of juice at 3rd and 1st. A lot of teams usually have a little heavier bats there. So you do have a pretty balanced lineup. Almost everybody in their lineup can hit 15 home runs, but you only have a couple of those guys that can hit like 30, 40. So kind of power comes from everywhere. Pitching wise, they got couple big names, Sixto Sanchez, and then a lot of high stuff guys. You see 4 guys in the bullpen with blue stuff. If you rate their stuff, they're just super high categories, especially with the 70 ability catcher. They're going to get a ton of strikeouts. The walks are going to be a little questionable. You do have some pretty good control of a few of the starters, though. It's just the bullpen is more focused on the high strikeouts. So if they can, but Toronto's first in base on balls, so I'd imagine it's going to be a tough matchup there with the low control ratings versus Toronto's high I ratings. I'd imagine Toronto will have quite a bit of walks. It's just pretty much it comes down to limiting the home runs. And then if you look at their advanced stats here, you got LA as middle of the pack offensively. They got second in base running, which is really good. The fifth in pretty much everything when it comes to extra base hits and offensive juice, but then they're a little bit lower in batting average and on base percentage only ninth. So kind of middle of the pack there. And just a tad above average, like a top 5 pitching staff. 7th bullpen ERA, but 4th in starters ERA. Total runs allowed, they're 5th, so 5th out of 15 in the top 3rd, squeaking in there. So pretty good defense, 6 overall, 2nd in efficiency. The home runs allowed really hurt them. That's 11th overall. That was quite a bit lower than all their other ratings. So it was just they do let up some walks and home runs, but they do strike out a ton of batters at 4th place, and overall strikeouts at 1,400 strikeouts there. So that matchup really just comes down to if Toronto can get some guys on base and hit some home runs against an LA squad that struggles against those two things, base on balls and home runs 8th and 11th. And then the other side of things, LA has quite a bit of power throughout the lineup, so that should be a really close matchup, really evenly matched there. The other side of things, you got KC's game. They had 86 wins. They had to take on the 104-win White Sox, so they're almost 20 wins behind. But in the playoffs, anything can happen. That regular season doesn't matter much. You got 3rd overall WAR in KC, which is crazy because they're only 11th in home runs. Runs scored, they're 4th though, so they just make a ton of contact, ton of movement on the base pass. So it really comes down to if Grandal, for the 55 arm on the White Sox, can limit the base running out of KC. Once KC gets guys on bases, they're a terror because all they have to do is steal second and hit a single and they score. So their team's really built around moving guys around the base pass there. Don't have much power, but still score their runs in different ways. Pitching-wise, they got really hurt with the bullpen ERA at 14th, but everything else they're solid in, except for the strikeouts. They're not a heavy strikeout team, but they do limit the walks pretty good and limit the contact a little bit. Really middle of the pack just overall in 8th, and runs allowed is kind of right in the middle there. That really hurt them was the injury to Pardinho. Pardinho was out for a couple rounds in the playoffs. So that's one of their big 3 starters. They got Alcantara and Hooper still, though. A couple nice lefties, then a couple pretty solid arms in the bullpen. Love this young guy, man. He's gotten crazy progression the last year or two. The 2nd-round pick with that crazy name. He is an absolute beast. So a couple big-time arms they got there. So that'll be an interesting matchup there. See if they can get some guys on base against a really heavy strikeout-heavy White Sox team. This White Sox team's really good. They got a ton of high-rated guys. If you look here, their stuff is just outrageous. A bunch of starting pitchers like 65, 70 stuff, and Massey, Jones, Soto. Really, really tough to avoid the strikeouts against them. So definitely they're going to get a bunch of strikeouts. And they're not going to let up a ton of home runs against a kind of a weaker hitting KC team that doesn't hit a lot of home runs. They also got a ton of movement, so I wouldn't expect a lot of home runs there. So it's just whether KC can make enough contact to get guys on base to play the small ball game. Then obviously offensively, you got a lot of big bats in Chicago's lineup here. Pacheco, Moncada, a couple of huge power guys. The outfield, Jimenez, the big power bat, and the other guys a little softer power wise. And Andrew Vaughn's the real wild card there as a big time bat. That's a tough matchup. That's really good offensive players across the board for the Chicago White Sox. Top 5 in almost everything offensively. Runs scored, they're 2nd. So pretty much like the 2nd best offense in the league, led by a bunch of heavy home run hitting. 3rd place in the home runs. Not great on the base pass. Only 12th in stolen base, so probably won't get too many stolen base against KC there. And then pitching-wise, they're top 3 in everything behind Boston, who's first place in a lot of these categories. 2nd in pitching WAR. Runs allowed, they're 3rd. So really, really solid, headlined by their starting pitching and then a couple big-time stuff arms in the bullpen. So really, really, really good team in Chicago. That's a interesting team to have to match up against in that first round. It's always tough. The AL so top-heavy. Those other 2 really high-win teams in Texas and Boston. White Sox got stuck in the wild card round. But Yeah, that should be a case. Definitely still winnable though. In a 5-game series, man, you could just get unlucky for a couple games. So I'd say the White Sox have quite a bit more talent, but you never know. KC's a really tough playoff team. Those base running teams are tough to stop in the playoffs. The White Sox 55 arm versus those base stealers. That's gonna be a cool matchup too. So one of my favorite matchups out of the wild card round. So excited for all 4 of those series. That's gonna be a big time to sim today to see how that goes. And then whoever wins those series get matched up against Boston, Texas, San Francisco, and Pirates in the next round. All 4 teams are so good, absolutely loaded squads there. So it's going to be tough, tough to see to make it through, but always a chance of coming from that wild card game. All you got to do is win a couple games and get lucky a few times. All the teams in the playoffs are really solid baseball teams, and the common denominator, what you notice here, is pretty much no weak pitching staffs. Everyone there, except for Washington, Colorado, ranks really highly in pitching. Those 2 teams obviously make up for it with their offenses, but really, really, really steady pitching on the AL side of things. All these teams here in the wild card round and the next round just have really good pitching. So there's going to be a lot of good pitching, and then a couple big matchups there with the home run teams versus the low movement teams. So I'm excited. We'll see how it goes. That's it for this episode.